they moved it to where it is now today at White and Vega. So they've actually done a lot of things here. This particular camp during the summer is a staff camp, and they do 4 things here. They have an ATV program, and if you go up on this ridge, you can actually see their garages for their ATVs around the other side of this hill over here. They do wood badge, it's kind of a wood badge museum, but they do Dutch undercutting, geocaching, and the scout rededication. So this is a pretty busy place during the summer. It's near the end of the road, so it's basically either a starting camp for the most part or a stopping camp. So if you're on a track and you start off at Rayado, you're probably going to go through here, and you may go through here when you end your trek. But wood badge was done here for many, many, many years. And at one time, in this lodge, any place that you could hang a flag, there were flags hanging. From every rafter that you see in here, there were more on the walls. There's a lot of pictures, and I would certainly invite you to take a look at the end of this presentation and look at some of the pictures. There's a lot of wood badge history here, and I'm going to talk about wood badge history and what was done here at Zastrow also at the end of the talk. So there are quite a few wood badge courses that were done here. And you know, wood badge has changed a lot since it started. Actually, Baden Powell did the first wood badge course in 1919, exactly. I wasn't around then. I think that I was. Okay, so you know, Baden Powell recognized the fact that in order for scouting people to do their jobs, they really need to be trained. And also, the first Chief Scout Executive of the Boy Scouts, Dr. James E. West, was asked once upon a time what he considered important for the scouting movement. And he said 3 things: training, training, and training. Okay, so that's how all this got started. Turns out that in 1922, Francis Gibney, who was the first camp chief at Gilwell, came to the United States on an invitation and attended the 2nd biannual conference of scout executives. And he talked a little bit about Gilwell, and he showed some scoutcraft skills that were done at Gilwell. But it didn't really catch on because he was very well liked, mostly as an entertainer and not as an educator. So it wasn't until 1935, actually 1934, when Baden Powell took a round-the-world trip. And in 1935, he actually visited the Schiff Scout Reservation in New Jersey. And that's basically when the seed for wood badge was sown. At that time, James E. West talked to BP about the importance of the kind of training that Schiff could provide for all dedicated scouters. And it turns out, I'm sure if you're in the OA, you've heard of E. Erner Goodman. E. Erner Goodman was the director of the program division at that time and was basically responsible for lining up the training for the first wood badge courses that were conducted at the Schiff Scout Reservation. This was back early in the 1930s, and the first American wood badge course, and this may not necessarily be considered the first American wood badge course, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Basically, that course was conducted in May of 1936 at Schiff. And the patrol names at that time were the Vernon Patrol, the Lewis and Clark Patrol, and the Chemo Wilder Patrol. And John Skinner Wilson, who was kind of a formidable guy, at the time was the camp chief at Gilwell Park, and they did 2 wood badge courses. One was a rover course. Rover is very similar to what exploring was back in the old days when it was more of an outside program. And John Skinner Wilson, who was a camp chief at Gilwell, was the scoutmaster for that rover course. And Richard Frost, who was a deputy camp chief at Gilwell, was his assistant. And the Boy Scout course, which is the second one they did in 1936, was done from May 24th to June 3rd, 1936. And it turns out that Bill Hillcourt, who's more commonly known as Green Bar Bill, attended the Rover Scout Wood Badge, the earlier course. And for the Scout course, the patrols were called the Owl Patrol, the Woodpecker Patrol, and the Wood Pigeon Patrol. And there was one patrol that nobody knows the name of. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look at some of the data that was written on early wood badge, there's a note in there saying, if you know the name of this patrol, please let us know. So there were a large, as a matter of fact, the early wood badge courses had a large number of professionals that were folks that worked at the national office. The problem was the way the British did wood badge, it was mostly lecture. As a matter of fact, and Skinner was so dogmatic about that, basically people didn't have a chance to provide any input, and a lot of people chafed at that, not being able to do that. So it was pretty much totally lecture. It was very British, and basically that course ended up getting thumbs down, okay, because people thought it was way too British. You know, too much lecture, not enough dialogue or conversation. But there were some people that took that course that really kind of got bit by the wood badge bug. And some people wanted to start wood badge in the United States and do it more American style. But the problem at that time was the war started. So that really put an end to that. The first real wood badge course at SHIP was done in 1948. And there was a camp chief at Gilwell by that time named John Thurman. He was really anxious to adapt wood badge to American Scout or training needs, rather than do it as a British course. And there was also a new Chief Scout executive at the time named Elbert Trotwell. Elbert was the person that succeeded James E. West, and he was kind of a training enthusiast. He had come from Columbia University, and he really favored wood badge, but like a lot of people, he really had to be shown that it was going to work. So the advocates of wood badge knew that if wood badge was going to succeed in the United States, that this had to really be a good course. So it was decided to do two courses in 1948. One of them was done at SHIP, Scout Reservation in New Jersey. The other one was done at Philmont, right here at Philmont. And since Greenbar Bill had gone through the Rover course, he was designated the Deputy Camp Chief of the United States and basically became the director of that course. The course covered basic scout requirements from tenderfoot to first class, patrol activities from the handbook for patrol leaders, activities from handbook for scoutmasters, and advanced scoutcraft from the new scout field book. At the time, they also went and reviewed a lot of other wood badge syllabuses, because wood badge was not just done in England, it was done in other parts of the world. So they actually went and reviewed some of those other courses. So the emphasis on this course was doing rather than lecturing. The course specifics, it was a 9-day course from July. The one at SHIP was July 31st through August 8th, 1948. There were 29 people that attended from 12 different states. Again, Bill Hillcourt was the scoutmaster for that course. And listen to some of the things that are specific about this course, because you're going to recognize them. As a matter of fact, we still do these today. The patrol names were Eagle, Bobwhite, Fox, and Beaver. Okay? Anybody resonate with those names? Okay. The patrol leaders rotated each day. There was a daily patrol leaders conference. They sang Back to Gilwell. Sound familiar? They made homemade flags, just like the ones you see in here. They had an unsupervised overnight camp, okay, which we kind of still do. The kudu horn was the program patrol totem, and the spade, and there are a lot of them up here, was the totem for the service patrol. The staff did an ideal troop meeting at first, a campfire, and the participants were challenged to outdo the staff. They had evening cracker barrels, and they had a feast and a closing ceremony that was highly emotional. Sound familiar? Yeah. I think I experienced that when I went to wood badge. Okay. Let's see, there were 29 participants, again from 12 states. There were 6 staff. There was a scoutmaster, a senior patrol leader, 2 special assistants, a scribe, and a quartermaster. The second wood badge course was also 9 days in October of 1948, and it was done Not here, it was done at Cimarroncito. Okay? Cimarroncito is fairly high, it's up about 8,000 feet. So one of the problems with that course was they had a lot of rain, they had sleet, and it was a long distance from the commissary. Okay? I don't think so. I drove to the commissary. Actually, I thought it was pretty close, but back in those days, back in 48, the cars probably weren't as good as they were today. I don't think they have four-wheel drive SUVs to deliver food. There were 35 participants, and they came from all over the country. Again, there were 6 staff: a scoutmaster, senior patrol leader, 3 special assistants, and a quartermaster. And I'll bet the quartermaster probably had their hands full. Probably more than Eric is doing right now. Greenbarville, again, was the 4th scoutmaster. And it was a slow start to the course, mainly because the mix of people that were on that course, half of them were professionals, and then half of them were volunteers. The volunteers thought the professionals had all the answers. The professionals were hanging back because they wanted the volunteers to provide the answers. So they were kind of at a stalemate until they had a meeting to resolve that. And the objective was to show the participants the technique of running this special kind of training so they could act as future WIDBAD course staff. But it was still a mountaintop experiences. After that got off to a good start. People really saw the value in doing WIDBAD. And so 4 courses were held in 1949, in addition to one that was held at Ship and one that was held at Philmont. The people that really operated WIDBAD training were at National, and they were at National for a while. And I'll get into when that all changed. Everybody was given an invitation from the Chief Scout Executive to attend. And this was fairly successful for a number of years. So by 1958, 4,959 participants had gone through WIDBAD. 3,190 had received their beads. I don't know what the percentage is, but that's really not a large percentage. And actually the percentage of people that got their beads increased after there were some other changes to WIDBAD. During 1958 alone, there was 1,089 participants who went through WIDBAD. So, since all these courses were growing, the natural question was, WIDBAD had been conducted out of the national office, so people started asking the question, can we do this out of the council? And lo and behold, what was the answer? Yes. Absolutely. We could do it, but the people were still concerned that if it went to the council level, that it still needed to be a quality course. And the people that really decided that thought that the WIDBAD should be conducted out of larger councils. One of their concerns about conducting out of a smaller council was that most people knew each other and they wanted to bring people together from a lot of different places. Kind of like what you're doing here. You know, if you do a council course, like a lot of us have done, you know a lot of people are going to WIDBAD. So, the first local council WIDBAD course was run by the Cincinnati Area Council, which later became the Dan Beard Council, in the summer of 1953, and that course was a great success. In 1954, that council did another WIDBAD course, and also in 1954, Baltimore, the Greater New York Council, Los Angeles Council, Middle Tennessee, the National Capital Area, Philadelphia, and San Francisco County all did WIDBAD courses conducted through their councils. So since 1953, many other councils have conducted WIDBAD courses. When I went through WIDBAD, way back in the dawn of WIDBAD, it was done out of the council. So from the beginning, there was a volunteer training service that was set up in New Jersey that basically administered WIDBAD, and they were responsible for overseeing the administration and supervision of WIDBAD, and also other forms of training, because they did all the course materials, they approved the courses, they approved the course directors, they provided all the resources, the certificates, the beads, the woggle, the neckerchief. They also directed national camp schools, and they assisted local councils with their training. They taught volunteer courses at the Philmont Training Center, and it soon became evident that councils were able to do this out of the council offices. There were 2 staff guides that were developed, one for local councils and one for national courses aimed at trained trainers. So the national courses were more for trainers, and the ones that were for councils were mainly done for probably scoutcraft skills. The national courses that were held, and if you look at some of these pictures in here, you'll see that some of these course numbers are like Wood Badge 238. They started at Wood Badge 1 and they were consecutive. They were numbered consecutive. And the national courses ended in 1973 after about more than 400 courses. And a lot of those courses were done here at Zastrow. There were cluster courses that were done in the regions. This was basically back when there were 12 regions. Okay, we went from 12 to 6 to 4, which we are now. And the council courses were numbered consecutively using the council number. So, for example, Atlanta is 92, and the 5th course in Atlanta would have been 92-5. And early in the 70s, there was what I consider really a watershed movement for Wood Badge. Okay? And this goes back to something called White Stag. How many people have heard of White Stag? Okay? And I'll tell you why that was significant. There were several people that were in the Monterey Bay Area Council that had been involved in research and development on leadership processes, some of those for the Army. They put together a training program for young men which would be directed at making them leaders. And since World War II, there were some studies that said if you're going to be a leader, there's certain skills that you need to know in order to be an effective leader. And these concepts they came into focus to a gentleman by the name of, and I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right, Bella Vanity, who's the principal guy that developed White Stag. They developed a course for troop junior leaders, and soon people outside of the Monterey Area Bay Council saw what was going on, and they actually liked what they were seeing. So those concepts for White Stag actually transitioned to leadership development for Wood Badge. They started doing experimental courses. There was a course in June of 1967, which was Wood Badge 314, that was held at Shiv. And in July of 1967, Circle 10, their 16th course, they held one at Philmont. And by 1967, several other councils had done that. And there were about 3 years of experimentation for this. And actually, junior leader training developed, the development portion of this program began in '69 and eventually became Troop Leader Development Course, later called Troop Leader Training Conference, and then Junior Leader Training Conference, which I was involved in a number of those. So, the skills that they thought were important were 11 skills of leadership. Did anybody take a Wood Badge course doing leadership development? Okay. Those ended around 2000 when we went to Wood Badge for the 21st century. But that's basically when those came to an end. And I went to Wood Badge in 1985, SC 293, and for me, that was an epiphany. When I learned the skills that they taught at Wood Badge, I thought those were incredible. They're going to help me in my family. They're going to help me at work where I was a supervisor. They were going to help me in my church duties. And it was just amazing how many of those leadership principles I could put into action. So the skills that they considered that were crucial to leadership were kind of grouped into 3 different categories. The first one was establishing the group. And the skills for that were communicating, knowing and using the resources of the group, and understanding the characteristics and needs of the group. The second grouping of those was developing the group, and those included representing the group, evaluating, controlling group performance, planning, counseling, and setting the example. And finally, getting the job done, effective teaching, which originally was called management of learning, and sharing leadership. So the differences between the prior Wood Badge courses were the older courses dealt largely with how to teach craft skills and or how to put on training courses, and the new Wood Badge for leadership development was actually leadership by design. Okay. The results, they got a lot of feedback that were similar to mine about the fact that people thought that they could use these leadership skills in their daily life for doing that. There was exploring wood badge. This was back when wood badge was more outside than it is inside, like it turned out to be. These courses were held during the 1950s, and there were 2 to 3 national courses a year. So over the 50s, there were probably about 30 courses in all that were done. The weekend courses were started in 1974. And there was also a Cub Scout trainer wood badge. There weren't a lot of those, but they were really designed more to teach Cub Scout people how to do training. So let's talk a little bit about Zastrow, because that's kind of what we're here for. We're in the lodge where all this wood badge stuff was done. First of all, Zastrow was named after a Russian immigrant by the name of Paul Zastrow. Back in the early 1900s, around 1911, the Abreu family had this land down here, and they basically sold it to a development company who parceled that land up. And Paul Zastrow ended up buying about 600 acres and lived in this area and homesteaded in this area for a while. It was hard to do that here because the irrigation was a problem. So by 1929, that had all dried up, and basically the land was obtained by Wade Phillips, who eventually gave it to Philmont. Okay, so that's where the name comes from. This particular lodge was built in 1949, 1950, I believe, for the sole purpose of bringing wood badge here. Okay, so wood badge courses started here in those early days, but it really took off when this lodge was built here in 1950. There were 54 national wood badge courses that were taught here. These are the ones that started with WV1 and were consecutive, but there were 54 of those that were taught here. 9 of those, the final 9, were basically based on the leadership development, or the 11 skills of leadership. There were 11 Explorer wood badge courses here that were done, 1951 to 1957. And there were 2 Central Region courses that were done here in 1982. One was done in 82, the other one was done in 86. And there were 29 South Central Region courses that were done here, starting with SC5 in 1993. This is basically when we had 6 regions. Those got consolidated eventually to the 4 regions that we have now, but basically all this area here was in the South Central Region. And my course number was South Central, but I didn't take it here at Philmont. There were 29 of those courses. It ended with SC 437, which was Walking Wood Badge 17 in 1992. There were 9 Southern Region courses here, starting in 1993 and ended up in the 2000s. And there were 7 Western Region courses that were held here. The last one was W5-412-01, which is my council did a wood badge course here in 2001. If you walk into that office, the picture of that course is in there. I was supposed to be on that course, but I was sent to Alaska to do work. So I developed with the staff but didn't go through the course. Let me talk about Walking Wood Badge, because that's probably the one that I'm most familiar with. Walking Wood Badge was started by a person by the name of Glenn Fowler. Glenn Fowler worked at Sandia National Labs where I worked, and I started working there in 1977. Glenn Fowler was my first vice president at Sandia National Labs. If you take a look at these older pictures here, there's a lot of Glenn Fowler in these pictures. Glenn Fowler did a lot of work for Philmont. As a matter of fact, the Philmont Staff Association has 2 awards they give out each year called the Silver Sage Award. Glenn Fowler was one of the first recipients of that award. Glenn Fowler was the first recipient, and the gentleman that started the Philmont Staff Association was the other person. So there's a lot of pictures of Glenn Fowler. A lot of these folks in these pictures I've actually worked with or known, even though they're old. Yes, I am old. The staff will tell you that. I am old, okay? I was fortunate enough to staff 7 Walking Wood Badge courses. I started with SC 353, and on that very back wall, right behind David, there is a fuzzy, furry fox flag back there. I was their coach counselor back in 1988. okay? I was on 16 wood badge staff, so I've done a lot of wood badge. 7 of those were walking wood badge courses. What we did in walking wood badge was we came here for 2 weeks. We actually did a track where we taught wood badge on the trail. We started here at Zastrow, and the staff basically did that track twice. They did it once when we did staff development, and then once when we did the actual course. So we started here at Zastrow. We went to the crags, through Abreu up to the crags, which is a trail camp halfway between Abreu and Fish Camp. We went through Fish Camp on our way up to the Agua Fria Camp and up to Lost Cabin, which is near Apache Springs. From there, we went, we took a long hike and went to a place called Geology Ridge where we had a rock box that was buried for years. Matter of fact, when I used to drive up for the commissar, I used to drive right by that place where the rock box was located. From there, we went to Crooked Creek and then to Upper Porcupine and stayed there. We went to Phillips Junction, replenished, and then up to Bogan for 2 days, then to Lower Bonita, and from there, we sent everybody out on their overnighter to Aguila, Bear Caves, and Toothache Springs on the side of Yucca Mesa. What we did was we, all that we carried was we carried a little puppet, because we did a little show with the puppet behind it, and it was called Rayado Rabbit. We always took the puppet with us, okay? And we did, at Lower Bonita, we did this little skit with the puppet. The other thing that we carried was the syllabus. And the syllabus, somebody had modified it so that it was about this big and it fit in your pocket. So everything that we taught was taught out of that little notebook. We didn't have PowerPoint, we didn't have rockets, we didn't watch movies, we taught everything out of that little staff guide. Clearly, we didn't teach a lot of scoutcraft skills, but we taught where we could. But most of the time, what we do is we did some sessions of those leadership skills as a patrol, and then some were done in a large group. For example, counseling. We did that in a large group because we did some role playing at Lower Bonita. And so you had to be a good facilitator, because basically you were really not teaching people, you were having people teach themselves, but you were there pretty much to guide the discussions. Philmont loved that course because a lot of people that came to Walking Wood Badge brought people here, and that was their first time to Philmont, like a lot of you, and they were so excited about that program that they bought Trexton. So Philmont loved it. There were 19 Walking Wood Badges that were done in 19 consecutive years. The last 2 were done out of the central or the southern region because that was right after the consolidation. Okay. SR 99 was the last Walking Wood Badge course that was done here in 1994. I was fortunate enough to be the course director for that. The staff thinks that there's a thing because I'm always saying I was the last person to do this. Okay, so I must have killed the program. Actually, it was terminated for a lot of different reasons. One of the things about Walking Wood Badge, it was one of the only courses at that time that was not conducted out of the council. Okay, all the other Wood Badge courses were conducted through council offices, either as a single course or as a cluster course with other councils. If you take a look, there's a lot of pictures down here. There's pictures of me, as Billy Joel would say, when I wore a younger man's clothes. It was a long time ago. So take a look at those. I mean, there's some really interesting things to see around the lodge. This place is very revered by people who have come here to do Wood Badge. Okay, me included. Back in 1994, when I stood out in that field and we did the last assembly, I thought that'd be the last time I'd be back here. Lo and behold, I've been back here at least a couple more times. Okay. If you go to camping headquarters, you're going to see a plaque on the wall. If you go into the office, it has 2 true horns. We gave that to Philmont in recognition for support for the 19 years that we've done Walking Wood Badge here. There were some pretty incredible people. The last course we did, everybody had been a course director. So all the staff were course directors. And They actually, I did the council course the year before that, so I was also fortunate enough to be a wood badge course director twice. But the beads that I got when I came to the last walking wood badge course were from 4 different course directors. And I value those very much. Because in all the things that I've done in scouting, and I've been blessed to do a lot of things, walking wood badge was the high point of my scouting career. Those were magical times, and I was fairly new. I've only been doing scouting since 1984. So I was fortunate enough to be involved in doing walking wood badge here at Philmont. Anybody have any questions? That's thunder. Nobody?